budget. We now return to the floor.
Mr. Speaker, I would like you to permit me, prior to my commencement of my contribution to the debate on this year's estimates of expenditure, with a brief reflection, Mr. Speaker, on myself. Because, Mr. Speaker, it was for me a most challenging year. It was for me a year when I think my resolve was tested as I went through the rigors of learning how to become a parliamentarian, a government official, whilst trying to balance family life, and then having to deal with what I think was the most difficult thing of all, is the loss of my mother, who has been a constant pillar and source of support in my life. And there are no tutorials in this job, Mr. Speaker, at all. And so that parliamentarians and government officials will make various mistakes, and I have made my mistakes, and I am ready and willing to admit them. At times, Mr. Speaker, I found myself becoming overwhelmed and somewhat consumed by the fact that I seem to be more criticized than the average Joe. Public criticisms, warranted and unwarranted, at times leveled at me from all angles, and the challenge of rising to the ever-growing demands of a tourism sector, a sector that was new to me. And of course, up to last night, the constant taunts and criticisms of a former Minister of Tourism, aided and abetted at times by some of his colleagues in this honorable House. But I'll be the first to admit, Mr. Speaker, that in the process of being disconsumed, I made one mistake which I will not make again. It is that I found myself sacrificing, in many instances, the people of Choiseul and Saltibus personally, because my presence was not what it ought to have been. And I apologize publicly to them, and I endeavor during the course of my 10 years as a parliamentarian to make up for that. That'll never happen to me again. Mr. Speaker, last year I spoke about hypocrisy, but this year I found a new appreciation for this word and concept. High on the list of those people who helped me to appreciate this is none other than the leader of the opposition himself. You see, Mr. Speaker, when we shift sides of the House, we seem to divert into an almost perpetual state of amnesia. And whilst in this state, the leader blasted this government over and over again, wastage, rampant spending, announcing publicly even when I thought one of the most caring things that someone who had just left the seat of opposition to now assume the reins of government would do, offer you an olive branch, tell you all of this is behind me, and let us move together to build our country, because it's a critical time for the St. Lucia, the country that we all represent and love. He announced that the olive branch offered to him was laced with thorns. And for this reason, he would not accept a vehicle used by him during his tenure as Prime Minister. It was offered to him as he now sits in opposition. Yeah. But somehow, Mr. Speaker, it was not wastage when the brand new, and I dare say more expensive Fortuner was accepted by him. And most magically, Mr. Speaker, the thorns of this olive branch suddenly either disappeared or became smooth and or bearable. Yeah. Mr. Speaker, interestingly enough, up to last night, any positive strides, Mr. Speaker, made within the tourism sector was quickly claimed by the opposition and attributed to the efforts of the former minister and self-proclaimed tourism expert. And strangely, to my utter shock, 2 nights ago, He has been publicly accredited by none other than his own colleagues for his expertise as a spendthrift and a poor manager. I didn't. Yeah. And at the same time, anything negative that happened within this sector was automatically attributed to this minister, his inexperience, according to them. And as I heard via the media on the platform of my dear colleague on the right, who's become better with time, that I am so confused, you know? So, Mr. Speaker, permit me to allude to facts as I show and support what was given to us, the allocation given to the ministry this year for tourism marketing. As I allude to facts, some from our past, so as to show, Mr. Speaker, who is confused and a dreamer, and who is a man of action and an implementer who does not talk, doesn't talk, yeah? And the facts will speak for themselves, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I get to boxing in paradise. I don't want to digress too far, Mr. Speaker, so I want to confine myself merely to the Economic and Social Review for the year 2011. The year just before we assumed, Mr. Speaker, the reins of governance here. 2011 showed declines were recorded in both stayover and cruise subsectors, resulting in a 3.9% reduction in total visitor arrivals in 2011. The Economic Review went on to state, Mr. Speaker, that this was influenced, and I go on, sluggish global economy, economic recovery, coupled with other adverse developments, rising oil prices and all. Cruise sector, Mr. Speaker, contracted by a further 5.9% on account of reduced cruise calls, resulting from rescheduling of vessels away from St. Lucia. And the most important thing that we can't overlook, because all this marketing is done for one thing, you know, not just to bring people to the destination so that they can spend within the destination. Visitor expenditure in 2011 declined by a whopping 7.4%. 7.4%. Now, Mr. Speaker, you know, 2011, when the country had more airlift than ever, 2011, when we were subject to the touristic genius and majesty of the former Minister of Tourism, who criticized me every week. What I want to point out, Mr. Speaker, is that lack of insight is not the reason for declines in arrivals that we suffered in 2012, and there was not much. As we experienced declines, Mr. Speaker, in tourist arrivals in 2007, 2009, and 2011, we were not there, but there are excuses for them. I'm surprised my colleague didn't try to jump over a 1.8 decline, which is in the Economic Review. Maybe he saw what was later on. We made more money. That's what it's about. They spent more money in our country. And we are on the path of recovery. And this is why the government has shown that they have confidence in this sector and have decided once again, Mr. Speaker, to inject significant sums into tourism marketing. Mr. Speaker, in 2012, we faced a whole host of challenges, a lot of them not out of our direct control. You know, statistics, Mr. Speaker, from time immemorial show that in the year of an election, American citizens, and that's our main source market, they tend not to travel. Last year was an election year. I said it then, and I say it now. We expect travel out of the American market to contract during an election year. Worse yet, we lost 21% of our seat capacity in America, our largest source market, when American Airlines, which had filed for bankruptcy since 2009, cut flights to some of our vital routes and terminated the American Eagle flight to St. Lucia, amongst other states. But I get them, Chief. Yeah. But Mr. Speaker, thanks to the sound business decision, and I'll go there right away in terms of what we had to pay. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, to the sound business decisions of the former Minister of Tourism, and the now opposition. This government was bridled with the sum of $7.4 million, Mr. Speaker, which had to be paid to American Airlines for a minimum revenue guarantee, gone chaotic. Chaotic. So we were in no position last year, Mr. Speaker, to even attempt to make an offer to Americans to entice them to continue to operate here. Yeah, coming back. Mr. Speaker, when you heard the members of the other side speak about wastage, I ask you to take their word for it, Mr. Speaker. Take their word for it, because they are authorities on the subject. Mr. Speaker, they aided and abetted that American Airlines guarantee. And that American Airlines guarantee, Mr. Speaker, and I put it down in simple terms, it cost the people of St. Lucia $1 million a month. $1 million a month, which we had to pay from the funds that we borrow. We don't get it like manna from heaven. We borrow those sums every year to market our country. So we had to pay that back, Mr. Speaker. And we paid it back last year out of the marketing dollars that were given to us by the government. And we thank them. We thank them for enabling us to do that. Mr. Speaker, with this 21% decline, we didn't sit by idly and wait like some anticipated for the sky to fall on our heads. We continued to aggressively market the destination in the United States. And as a result, even with a 21% decline in seat arrivals, we managed to experience only a 6% decline in the American market. 6% decline, Mr. Speaker. For that performance alone, we should be commended. And I should commend at this time openly, Mr. Speaker, the Tourist Board, the management and the staff of the Tourist Board, Mr. Speaker, for their efforts in attempting to salvage our country from the brink of ruin in some instances. Mr. Speaker, our total decline, in terms of the decline in total visitor arrivals last year, was a mere 1.8%. 1.8%. Nothing compared to what our regional partners have faced or suffered during the same time frame. Mr. Speaker, but whilst we experience a 1.8 decline, what do the facts show? It shows that the most important thing, visitor spend, increased by over 2%. So that whilst the numbers went down, it's not just seats on a plane and seats in a hotel, beds in a hotel, but those who came here spent more money. So the country benefited more from the arrivals that we had over what the numbers that we had last year. That's what it's about. Yeah, I got it wrong. I will not throw money to bring all airlines into St. Lucia foolishly, but we will concentrate on our efforts to ensure that there's maximum benefit to our country, the people of this country. Money well spent, Mr. Speaker. That is why, Mr. Speaker, once again, despite the inexperience of this minister, despite his confusion, that the Minister of Finance saw it necessary once again to allot $45 million to tourism marketing in these tough times, because he is confident that with this policy direction, with the direction that we are taking and have taken over the past year, St. Lucia will do well, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, again in 2012, despite the effects of the recession in the United Kingdom, and I mentioned last year that we anticipated declines in arrivals due to the fact that the Olympics were taking place in London. That dreaded APD is still there, haunting us, Mr. Speaker, and it renders it more expensive for visitors from the United Kingdom, which is our key and second largest source market of travel to St. Lucia. We experienced a 6% growth in this market, Mr. Speaker. And it didn't end there. We experienced also a 6% growth out of Canada as well. In other parts of Europe, we experienced a 7.7% increase in arrivals from other parts of Europe and 13.3% increase in arrivals from the rest of the world. So, Mr. Speaker, the other area where we experienced some declines was in the Caribbean. But the time has come, and we've discussed and debated this at the governmental level on many occasions, when Caribbean governments have to come together to tackle what is the main impediment to regional travel, which is our own taxes. And when this is done, we are sure and confident that we can encourage more frequent and better travel between the various Caribbean islands. Nonetheless, Mr. Speaker, our initiatives as to marketing in the Caribbean are still aggressive and strong. We are trying to forge stronger links with Martinique and Guadeloupe, our French islands, and we have shown considerable growth from those markets, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we will not repeat these nightmarish decisions of our predecessor government. Whether they, as a matter of either convenience or downright dishonesty, choose to overlook those decisions. We use the budget given to us in 2012 to engage in a targeted airlift strategy. This strategic approach, Mr. Speaker, enabled us to announce only this week that United Airlines will be flying weekly to St. Lucia from New Jersey, commencing the 13th day of July. We are also, Mr. Speaker, and I'll announce it publicly, Mr. Speaker, that Thomas Cook will be putting a new weekly service from Manchester to St. Lucia. Yeah? And this will greatly enhance our connectivity to the rest of Europe. And that Virgin Atlantic, it doesn't end there. I'm confused there, Mr. Speaker, but it doesn't end there. You know? Virgin Atlantic will be increasing the frequency of their service to St. Lucia from twice weekly to 5 times a week. You know, not shabby, eh? You know? People who are confused, you know, Mr. Speaker, like myself. Mr. Speaker, our mandate and mantra for 2013 and beyond, Mr. Speaker, has to be the pursuit of an airlift strategy that is sustainable. Mr. Speaker, I place emphasis on the fact that the airlift initiatives that we embark on must be sustainable. That is how we're going to use the budget given to us, Mr. Speaker, strategically, and to approach this issue of airlift in a manner that is sustainable. Mr. Speaker, the soundest minds in this industry, both here and abroad, all concur. Soundest minds, I said, huh? Not those you hear on TV every night. The soundest minds in this industry, both here and abroad, all concur that the sustainability that we seek, Mr. Speaker, dictates that we steer away from the reckless practice of throwing money at airlines. Like our treasury is limitless, as was the practice between 2007 and 2011. And I'm so pleased that there are still a couple of them on my right, barring you. You weren't there. Yeah? Yeah? Because they're very familiar with it. Mr. Speaker, we intend to use the allocation given to us, Mr. Speaker, $45 million to attain the target of an increased total visitor arrival to St. Lucia at between a modest 3 to 5% this year. Within the framework of the implementation of the strategic approach to marketing, a number of new initiatives, Mr. Speaker, all aimed at increasing arrivals will be introduced during the coming year. Mr. Speaker, both you and this country will see, Mr. Speaker, in a real way, initiatives geared towards penetrating Latin America. Now, I am sure, Mr. Speaker, when you hear a Minister of Tourism stand here and speak about penetrating Latin America, you and maybe other St. Lucians probably say, man, Latin America, yeah, right. Because they have heard it from the now opposition, who, as usual, whilst in government, mouthed off about everything. Everything. Just as they're doing now in opposition. Mr. Speaker, lip service was paid to an emerging market like Latin America, which is vital to our country, both for tourism and trade, because we do a lot of business with Latin America. Mr. Speaker, this government, Mr. Speaker, is nothing like the former government. Nothing. Proudly. And what I will tell you, Mr. Speaker, is that at this very moment, we are showing you that there's no lip service, but action from this side. Because as I address you, Mr. Speaker, in total support of these estimates, a team of officials, Mr. Speaker, from the St. Lucia Tourist Board is in Brazil, holding talks with trade and travel partners in Brazil, as this market, Mr. Speaker, is being targeted as the first in our drive to finally penetrate the Latin American market. Now, the importance, Mr. Speaker, of targeting this market is because this market fits squarely into our targeted approach to reduce the level of seasonality that we have in our flow of visitor arrivals and visitor traffic into St. Lucia, particularly during the summer months, which coincides with the winter season in these Latin American countries. Mr. Speaker, we intend to bear witness to what a focused marketing strategy can yield. Maybe, Mr. Speaker, the former government would prefer that we do like them and jump up all the teeth outside. You should have seen them in a boxing ring, like jesters at the king's table, after we spent $3.47 million, Mr. Speaker, of borrowed money in one night on Boxing in Paradise. All of them were in the ring, grinning and on ESPN. But Mr. Speaker, you must have a targeted marketing approach. You don't just listen to a former minister who tells you $3.47 million in one night and the Mexicans will come. Mr. Speaker, no strategy was in place to lure the very Mexicans into St. Lucia. How would they come to St. Lucia? How are they supposed to get here? No airlift. They're supposed to come on what? A broom? Mr. Speaker, and they talk about wastage. Wastage. Yeah. They're bringing up jazz, huh? Wait, ACCA, FCC, I'll get to those. Hold on. Mr. Speaker, those very individuals, they have the gall to stand in public and accuse this government of wasting money and borrowing, rampant borrowing. You hear them all the time. When the Treasury had a surplus, they squandered it. They squandered it. They sat comatose as borrowed funds were used once again to hold FCCA, Mr. Speaker, FCCA at a cost of $3.564 million. And the ironic thing, Mr. Speaker, is that ever since hosting FCCA, Cruise Association, big thing, bringing all the cruise partners to St. Lucia, cruise arrivals continue to plummet. Ironic. So no plan, big grandiose schemes, you know, hosting of self-aggrandizing events that will have absolutely no benefit to this country. But we will salvage the cruise sector, Mr. Speaker. Cruise calls are slated to increase this year, Mr. Speaker, and even further next year. That's from aggressive marketing from this team and aggressive use of the budgets that have been assigned to us, Mr. Speaker. We will, during the coming months, Mr. Speaker, reinstate the Rangers program, hopefully, and a national program aimed at strengthening visitor safety, because we have to save the sector from those bandits out there. We have to. Mr. Speaker, during this year, we will also press for part of the legislative budget to be spent on the implementation of stronger laws to protect visitors to our shores from harassment and other crimes, and regulations which will empower us to set enforceable standards to govern the sector. And last night again, Mr. Speaker, I don't know what's wrong with the former minister. He doesn't learn. Last night again, talking about our standards. You were there as a guru and imposed no standards. Keep quiet. Nothing. Yeah. Standards on nothing. When other person is doing what you only dreamt about doing, young man, be quiet and let people do the business of this country. If you can't support it, keep quiet. Yeah, we no seat. Mr. Speaker, during this year, Mr. Speaker, following on the success, maybe I should double track on something, because on wastage, my colleague here from Miku North made a couple comments that got to me. I was actually surprised that she said that, because she jumped into the budget and spoke about increases for the Ministry of External Affairs, as if those increases are so glaring, so large, so out of the ordinary. Mr. Speaker, those increases that were given are less than the annual phone bill of the former Minister of Tourism. And I have it here, Mr. Speaker. I don't just talk. You see, those who come inside of here and want to accuse you of being on boat on Good Friday and just run them out, I'm not one of those. I'm not one of those. I come with the information from the financial controller. Hey. Mr. Speaker, in fact, so that they don't say I said it and didn't say what it was. In 2010, phone bill, $41,903. A lot of ministries would love to have that money. You smile, you should have stopped him. 2011, $48,916. Mr. Speaker, the man needs blows. Ministries would love to have that money to inject it, Mr. Speaker, into the development of this country. We don't know who he is calling. People in Malta and Gibraltar. Yeah, Dubai. Never been to Dubai. And on top, it's a good thing you said Dubai, Mr. Speaker. It's a good thing. It's a good thing Prime Minister mentioned Dubai. Mr. Speaker, I've never been to Dubai. I've never been to Dubai. I get on the travel. But whilst the member from Miku North spoke about the functioning of our missions, Mr. Speaker, my first opportunity to travel to Dubai on a trade mission for this country is orchestrated, organized, the funding arranged by one of our foreign missions at zero cost to the government of St. Lucia. Zero cost. It's on the cards right now. The only issue with it is that, yes, it will come at a cost. The cost is to me because it comes at a time when we are about to see the Jazz and Arts Festival on. And I may have to compromise being there to see it happen so that I can serve my country overseas. No cost. Done because now, finally, our missions are functioning. Not a free-for-all, fet or fet match, as happened over the last 5 years.
True.
Money. Travel. I heard the honorable former. Oh, Mr. Speaker, have more bills, have more bills. Mr. Speaker, if you wish, I can say openly, and the documents from the financial controller show that in 4 years, Honorable Alan Chasney, 7194200, cell number, total bills, $134,464. More than the capital budget of some ministries. Phone bill alone. And I can present mine. Since I have been here, Mr. Speaker, and I mean, I traveled, I roamed, I did all kinds of stuff, Mr. Speaker. I called because I had to do the business of this country. $3,100, I can make my bill a document of the House if you want it, to show we know how to spend wisely the country's money. You know? Yeah, and I'll win it again. You know, Mr. Speaker, during this year, Mr. Speaker, following the success of this special showcase on St. Lucia in the United Kingdom, we'll be hosting a similar program in North America, in the North American market, in July this year. We attributed a large measure, Mr. Speaker, our success in the United Kingdom to this St. Lucia showcase, and we hope that it will drive similar results to the North American market. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Matt Damon, and I have to talk about that, Mr. Matt Damon and his entourage did not come to St. Lucia by accident. They were here because St. Lucia stands out in the romance market, Mr. Speaker. And we made money. Romantic, yeah? All right. You too. Mr. Speaker, and we made money from this venture. Our local people benefited even more as all the services ancillary to this event were locally procured, Mr. Speaker, unlike boxing in paradise. Mr. Speaker, and you know what it cost this country? Blocking off a beach for 2 days. You know? And it cost me the criticism from a whole set of people. I ain't gonna call them names. A whole set of people. Some knowledgeable St. Lucians who, I hope, Mr. Speaker, in the absence of the Matt Damons out there, would sustain this economy from their own pockets. Can't do a thing. As we got millions, Mr. Speaker, of free publicity from this international event. We made People magazine and others at no cost to the government of St. Lucia. Otherwise, Mr. Speaker, we would have had to dig deep into our pockets and use our marketing funds, which are already scarce, in order to gain that kind of publicity. So let them criticize me. Criticize me. I'm confused, you know? Now, Mr. Speaker, there's still more potential for us to capitalize on the base that we have in the romance market and cause it to grow even more. And this year, we're going to utilize the allocation given to us to host for the first time a wedding symposium during the month of September. What this symposium will do, Mr. Speaker, it's going to allow many of the major players in the weddings and honeymoons market from overseas to come to St. Lucia for a few days, examine our product, engage in structured and organized meetings with our various industry partners, and interact with our local service and accommodation providers. Yeah? Most definitely in Soufrière. Mr. Speaker, it is expected to translate into increased arrivals, Mr. Speaker, and more Matt Damon-style weddings for this country. Mr. Speaker, this symposium will cost us a mere fraction of the $7.51 million that the hosting of Caribbean Marketplace cost the taxpayers of this country. You know? And that happened when the members opposite were in government. $7.51 million for the hosting of Caribbean Marketplace. Yeah. Mr. Speaker, it'll cost us even less than the millions that we wasted on food and rum. You know the Food and Rum Festival, Mr. Speaker? Food and Rum Festival. We spent millions on it. It's now scrapped, you know? But today, you know, they come here and they try to blame the government for our economic situation. All of these borrowed funds, Mr. Speaker, going into all these self-aggrandizing schemes and events, Mr. Speaker. Nothing said, comatose, you know? Mr. Speaker, you know, when I see that kind of reaction, you know, I probably need your assistance, Mr. Speaker, because I believe the English translation to that Creole statement, sans honte, is most applicable to them.
How do you say it?
Sans honte. I'll take guidance from the chair if necessary.
Without shame.
Yeah.
Without shame.
Yeah, sans honte. Mr. Speaker, you know, when we went to travel trade this year, Mr. Speaker, we heard from St. Lucians near and far and went to travel trade. And I'm pleased, Mr. Speaker, to announce that we moved away from the tagline, "Live the legend," which we copied. Live the legend is not ours, Mr. Speaker.
Yeah?
It was copied, pasted, plagiarized. Yeah? And it cost us over $900,000, Mr. Speaker.
What?
No, EC. 300 plus thousand EC, US dollars, yeah. Peru. It just took going on the internet, you know, Mr. Speaker, and you'd see "Live the Legend" was not ours. But you see, we were in a different legendary time. A time of legendary wastage. A time of legendary expenditure. A time like "let us dépenser l'argent Saint Lucien" for nothing. Mr. Speaker, so out of our former budget, Mr. Speaker, we now readopted the tagline, "Simply Beautiful." Yeah? Yeah? A tagline that we can identify which best reflects St. Lucia and St. Lucians, because we are a simply beautiful island and a simply beautiful people. And it cost us, Mr. Speaker, 24,000 EC dollars, which have to do with paperwork, artwork, and things like that. You see, we can do things here, Mr. Speaker, and do them well, and use the monies of this country in a proper manner. Yeah, creative industries, we'll get there. There are a few changes we have to make too. We're getting there. Yeah. So, we'll be using this to go hand in hand, Mr. Speaker, with our new marketing campaign, which deals with elevated experiences, Mr. Speaker. And our last budget enabled us to pursue this marketing campaign. And we are thankful for the support then and the support now that we have gotten. Mr. Speaker, now I'll go on too quickly, Mr. Speaker, because it is absolutely necessary for me to justify our current budget, Mr. Speaker, from what we have utilized as well in the past, our last budget for. So, Mr. Speaker, you heard calls recently for some quarters, this ban the jazz festival. Oh, Lord. You know, we know, Mr. Speaker, the jazz festival had already achieved its objective and was being viewed as an albatross around the necks of St. Lucians. But the festival in its original form, Mr. Speaker, it cost the former government, and you know, the leader of the opposition, asking, I don't know what this festival is going to cost. It cost them $7,969,454. $7,969,454 to hold this simple, ordinary jazz festival. Okay. Yes? Not one of them, not a boy, Mr. Speaker, said a word in condemnation of those sums when they were expended. They were too busy, Mr. Speaker, enjoying the red carpet syndrome, the freeness, and some of them getting jumped over on stage, to their pleasure. Yeah. Yeah, too busy. Then jumped over to their pleasure and the absolute horror and shame of the people of this country. That they couldn't see $8 million being spent. But now that we have revamped this festival, along with the Creative Industries Ministry, we put our heads together, Mr. Speaker, to create something that is uniquely ours, create an experience that is uniquely St. Lucian. They complain. They're accustomed to spend money. I know these members on the other side. They're accustomed. They ask, what did it cost to rename this festival? Mr. Speaker, it cost us the appointment of a good board of the St. Lucia Tourist Board, because the board took the decision and renamed the festival themselves after taking some advice. MP? Amy Weiner, $1.3 million. Mr. Speaker, 1.3 million. I have the bill here, Mr. Speaker.
You mean Amy Weiner?
Mr. Speaker, I know in case they ask, I brought it here. I come armed, Mr. Speaker, and I was waiting for anybody who had something else to tell me about wastage. All of those ministers that travel at the expense of the tourist board when they're not supposed to. Radio announcers traveling at the expense of the tourist board. I have everything from the financial controller. Talk about wastage. I was a lawyer, you know, don't play with me. And when we go into other fora, those people who like to point fingers and call people names, when the Prime Minister gives that nod, tattoo. Yeah, I have it there. Mr. Speaker, you see, the new Jazz and Arts Festival, Mr. Speaker, is something that was designed to, provide a broader platform for the development of our tourism product and the creative industries together, Mr. Speaker. The objectives of this new venture, Mr. Speaker, is very simple, and I'd like to outline it because it's important to us. To use the brand capital of St. Lucia, Jazz, to enhance the global awareness of the country, to create positive perceptions and the involvement of tourism by the public, St. Lucian public, to enhance the development of St. Lucia's creative industries, and to celebrate our heritage and economic returns to the national community, Mr. Speaker. All of these benefits, Mr. Speaker, and I hope the artists in St. Lucia are listening, all of those, Mr. Speaker, and it costs this country less than $100,000 more than it costs them. And this is an investment we made in our people, Mr. Speaker. That $100,000 extra that we have injected into creating this new enterprise called the St. Lucia Jazz Festival is an investment, a sound investment by this government in the people of this country. Yeah. Mr. Speaker? Yeah. Not all. The importance, Mr. Speaker, of the cruise and yachting sectors is something that we can't underscore, Mr. Speaker. And even with our constrained budget, Mr. Speaker, this year, we saw an allocation of $190,000, Mr. Speaker, for the development of the pleasure craft sector and the yachting maritime project. However, we're going to use that money well. It might not seem like much. It might seem like less than the travels of the former minister. However, we will use it carefully, Mr. Speaker, so as to ensure that visitor arrivals, Mr. Speaker, increase by what we perceive maybe 15% in the yachting sector this year. And I'll tell you how we went about doing it, Mr. Speaker. And you may have noticed notable increases in mega yachts in St. Lucia. Rodney Bay, Marigot Bay, Soufrière, etc. So we are trying to ensure that St. Lucia becomes poised, Mr. Speaker, as a mega yacht hub. Now, within the coming weeks, Mr. Speaker, we who have sought to capitalize on the fact that St. Lucia is becoming more visible as a mega yacht hub, we have organized, Mr. Speaker, and will soon announce that there is a huge international mega yacht regatta which is going to tremendously enhance our appeal, which is going to be coming to St. Lucia. And we're going to be announcing it, Mr. Speaker, within a few weeks. We don't jump before we know what we have, fully. We're tightening up what we need to do, and this announcement will be made shortly. We will be supporting this, Mr. Speaker, from the marketing funds that have given to us so graciously, and with the confidence of the government of St. Lucia standing behind us. This year also, Mr. Speaker, we are trying to press because of the interest from the mega yacht sector, so as to use the allocation given by the government for legislative reform for the purpose of drafting the legal framework for the establishment of a yachting registry. I mentioned it last year, but Mr. Speaker, it is something that we are driving for to be done out of this year's budget. And laws which can adequately govern the yachting sector. Mr. Speaker, yachting is important. Imagine now we've moved from one event, and the announcements have to come soon too, from one event from the Ark to 4 events from Ark. It shows that we are aggressively pursuing things within the yachting sector. 15 minutes, Mr. Speaker?
Yes, Honourable Member.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'll touch creative industries very quickly, Mr. Speaker, because I will address it significantly otherwise, and I'm going to dive deep into Choiseul and Saltibus, Mr. Speaker. Yes, Mr. Well, Mr. Speaker, creative industries, we are alive and well. Alive and well. The allocation given to us of $2 million this year, Mr. Speaker, will be very well spent. And you know what we will do? We will do like we did last year and collaborate with our partners from NICE so that we could host things like the performance program. The performance program that employed 454 people, and I like referring to those numbers because it is people in this country that we are employing within a few months. 454 people, all of them. Member from Miku can smile. People from Miku were performing. Yeah, they had a good time. And they got paid for their efforts, Mr. Speaker. But I will go to it at another stage in detail, Mr. Speaker, as we speak about the initiatives. CDF, Mr. Speaker, I'm very proud of the board and staff of CDF as they have embraced, Mr. Speaker, their role in driving the cultural policy forward. So, Mr. Speaker, the government has allotted $1.718 million specifically to the operations of CDF. We're thankful for it, and we'll use it wisely, very wisely, including the, the National Arts Festival, which was just concluded. Brilliantly done. The government has graciously given us the sum of $60,000 this year, which is going to allow for the continuation, Mr. Speaker, of that program. I'm correct, $60,000, which is going to allow for the continuation of this program. Now, Mr. Speaker, Choiseul and Saltibus. Oh, you know, you hear them saying he's not there. Yeah, he must travel to do the business of this country. But whilst that business is being done, Mr. Speaker, organization enables you to have strong constituency groups, which is going to enable the work of the minister to continue to be done in the seat of Choiseul and Saltibus. So, Mr. Speaker, there are individual projects that I will refer to at another stage, but I prefer to go about it right now by alluding to numbers, because you hear them everywhere. They say they're creating jobs, jobs, jobs. Where are the jobs? I'll show you jobs in Choiseul. Under NICE, and things got nicer with NICE closer to the end of the year, Mr. Speaker. That's why we support the $9 million given for the continuation of that program. That social program must continue. During NICE, Mr. Speaker, a total of 49 people employed as office attendants, IT assistants, 20 caregivers, 4 caretaker watchmen, daytime watchmen, and the list goes on, janitors, cooks in Choiseul. 49 out of that program. All these employees' salaries totaling $628,623.92. We are employing our people through this program, Mr. Speaker, people who had no opportunity before. That's what we're doing. STEP, they're criticizing STEP. But in Choiseul, we had, and we use our STEP carefully, Choiseul people are very smart. So we managed to utilize our program to employ 1,294 people. Jobs for 1,294 people, Mr. Speaker, created by STEP. I will collectively group our small projects, Mr. Speaker, under the Constituency Development Program, programs for the Ministry of Infrastructure and from the SSDF, Mr. Speaker, and I thank them all for the support that they gave to the people of Choiseul and Saltibus. We did footpaths, concrete roads, painting, fencing, desilting. 43 small contractors were awarded contracts from these programs. And as a result, through the direct implementation of these projects, 172 additional persons were employed in Choiseul and Saltibus, Mr. Speaker. These projects, an estimated cost of $1,457,610.60. I ain't forgetting a cent. It was all well spent for the people of Choiseul and Saltibus. And Mr. Speaker, I will tell them as we continue the social programs, better days, Mr. Speaker, will continue to come for the people of Choiseul and Saltibus. They'll continue. The Christmas, the stimulus program, $115,000 spent, which was employed 34 people in Choiseul. Mr. Speaker, it shows that despite the criticisms, and despite the harsh economic times, that this government is sensitive to certain social realities whilst we balance the economic budget, Mr. Speaker. And we will continue these programs as they are beneficial to the people of this country. Mr. Speaker, there are other programs which involve the upgrading of playing fields. And this year, between the Ministry of Sports and through our contribution through the Constituency Development Program, we will turn PI, Mr. Speaker, into a field that is reminiscent of those we see on television overseas. It will be the premier cricket facility in the south of the island, Mr. Speaker, and we will do that this year, Mr. Speaker. By far. Yes, sir. Mr. Speaker, in terms of road rehabilitation programs, Mr. Speaker, you know, when I heard the member from Mico speak about the deplorable state of Mico from all aspects, Mr. Speaker, I wondered who represented Mr. Speaker Mico since the days of adult suffrage. So who should be blamed for the state of Mico at this point? Not us. No, just we. So, Mr. Speaker, Morgan Scott, Mr. Minister of Sports, thank you for the work that's going to be done there, for the lighting that is going to be done there, and we will also change the surface of the Morgush Court, Mr. Speaker. Now, Mr. Speaker, we know that there are limited funds, $2 million, Mr. Speaker, for bridge rehabilitation, but of importance to us is the bridge at Port George. The bridge of Port George needs to be done. There's a bridge, Mr. Speaker, also at Jetwin and one at Daba, which realistically, Mr. Speaker, when the rainy season comes, these areas can become impassable. So during the course of what we're going to be doing this year, which involves the renovation of those key roads and areas, we are asking for some favorable consideration. Choiseul is not greedy, and we're patient, Mr. Speaker. If they do one, we'll be thankful, Mr. Speaker. But we are identifying the fact that these areas need to be done and in dire need of attention. Mr. Speaker, under road rehab, you know, with so much money blasting around over the last 5 years, it hurt my soul to see the state of the roads at Park Estate. The road at Balka, where some of my loved ones are, the Williams family. I love them to death, my close family. But getting to them is an issue. Park Estate is bad. Fiat is bad. But Mr. Speaker, we are going to do the best that we possibly can. Utilize some funds from the CDP, utilize some funds from the Ministry of Infrastructure, and see how we can alleviate some of the hardship to the constituents from these areas. But what we are doing now, Mr. Speaker, we think, you can't build roads, you don't build drains. So what we have started doing during the course of this year, we started building drains in a number of these areas. So when the time comes for the roads to be done, the drains will already be in place, Mr. Speaker. So it's a system that we've put in place because we're thinking about the future development of those areas in Choiseul, and we'll bring relief to them. Mr. Speaker, we have in place now a constituency council. Finally, a constituency council that is not there to function at the behest of the parliamentarian, not one that is there to fuel the political agenda of the parliamentarian, but one which is a true constituency council, which gets assistance from other projects as they implement a program which includes social and public work. So, Mr. Speaker, I thank the Minister of Social Transformation for all that he has done in Choiseul and Saltibus. That even if the Morgush Community Center, which went over in cost, and Mr. Speaker, we're going to put our finger down on all those monies that went AWOL in Choiseul and Saltibus. I thank him for the additional $140,000 so that we could complete it. The next phase will be for us to computerize a lovely computer room that you gave us downstairs. And then we will officially open the Morgush Community Center.
5 minutes left.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, there's so much more I would love to say about Choiseul and Saltibus. And things got nicer. It took a little time, it took a little elbow, But things got nicer in Choiseul, and we finally implemented some programs that we wanted to see underway during this year, Mr. Speaker. So the sum of $300,000, we managed to squeeze out, part of it, but we are thankful for what the NICE program has managed to do. Mr. Speaker, at this time, Mr. Speaker, I just want to take this opportunity to continue to thank the people of Choiseul and Saltibus for their prayers. Thank them for their support. Thank them for their criticisms when you need to be criticized. Thank them for their advice. It helps me grow stronger. I thank them, Mr. Speaker, especially when they listen time and time again to the airwaves and hear the sort of things that are being said about their rep. Hear the things that are posted on the internet all the times about their rep and say, Rep, don't worry about them, Rep. We're standing there with you. We're standing with this government, Mr. Speaker. I thank them for that. I thank you for how you preside over these proceedings, Mr. Speaker, as well. I thank you for that, because I know, Mr. Speaker, it is difficult at times controlling those, Mr. Speaker, who have no understanding or appreciation for the rules and orders of this House. I know it can be difficult, but Mr. Speaker, you do your best. But it's not your fault, Mr. Speaker, because in some instances, my mother, who left this world, had an interesting saying. She says sometimes, Mr. Speaker, it's a rough saying, but she says sometimes you put a pig in a palace, it will grunt. So you need to have strong rules in place which will control people and ensure that this House remains an honorable place, because the children of this country, who the Minister of Education is daring to educate, are looking up to us and expect higher standards from all of us, Mr. Speaker. I thank you.
Ça, c'était membre du Parlement pour choisir honorable Lorne Theophilus. La présentation était parlé à sous affaires tourisme à Saint-Lucie. Comme ça, il dit, il y a il dit, c'est en 2011, la tenue moins touristes qui étaient venus à Saint-Lucie. Mais le gouvernement ni un plan pour augmenter le tourisme à Saint-Lucie. Comme ça, le gouvernement de Saint-Lucie a joué $45 millions pour augmenter les affaires tourisme à Saint-Lucie. C'est pas que fait, c'est pour augmenter le tourisme à l'Amérique. Mais actuellement, le ministre et le représentatif Babounou Kai parlé à présent, nous avons gardé ça et dit.
Mr. Speaker, as I rise to partake in the estimates of revenue and expenditure of this third session of this 10th Parliament of St. Lucia,